Hey everyone, I'm Klloo, and welcome to the data pack Runechant, A World to Discover, a massive survival data pack filled with magic and mysteries. Experience new seasons as you traverse different biomes, craft and cast powerful spells, enhance your weapons with new forms of brewing, or gain different abilities through trimming equipment, which has also been extended to weapons and tools. With 8 new advancement tabs to pursue, come experience a whole new world. The data pack is finally at a state release, so no better time to start playing and preparing for more endgame content to come. You can find the pack on Planet Minecraft or Moderate, or of course in the links down below. Right, so 1.20.5 is soon to be released, right? We're on to the pre-release snapshot, so as long as once all the big bugs are squashed, we should be good. Which means we need to start working on redoing the pack. Now, initially I was porting it over, right? With the whole new component system, I basically started with the loot tables. So if we go all the way out, Minecraft, loot tables, right? And we go into any of them, I have updated them to the best of my ability to reflect the component changes, right? So instead of set NBT, it's now set components with all the individual components. Not too difficult, right? Just a lot of finding the poor language and updating it to the new language. So I could do a little bits on mass and little bits, spot here and there. But I've decided that is probably not the best way to go about it, right? The new component system is very flexible, and there's lots of great stuff you can do with it. In fact, we'll go over some of those things today, but more or less this is also a video for a pack update, right, regarding the Runechant pack. And instead of just porting stuff over, right, fixing up all the functions so that they correspond to the new language in 1.20.5, I've decided to more or less rebuild it, right, from scratch. That way I can more easily implement features in the future. I can squash bugs that come up, and I can also just refine it, right, in my 2 years of making functions, starting with an actual world with command blocks and now data packs. I've learned a lot and been taught a lot that I'd like to retroactively implement, and there's no better time than now to do just that. Unfortunately, I had already started porting it over before I made a decision. So basically what I've been up to is segmenting the pack. So I decided to implement a modular system. This was asked, and it makes a lot of sense, right? You don't want some of the features, you don't have to use some of the features. Again, for bug fixing or implementing features, makes it a lot easier for me to find everything I'm working with. And the way it will work is just through scoreboards, nice and simple. Just do a check. So depending on what modules are set to 1 versus 0, they will then be active, and I can use that to gate all the other functions that correspond to it. So setting wise, you can either edit the file, or I will implement something in game for you to toggle all the scoreboards on and off that you want. But yeah, so everything will be broken up, split apart, and rewired in a modular fashion, which is in itself a decent amount of work. So will be a little bit slow as I work through it all. But currently what I'm doing is I'm rebuilding every single item for the pack from scratch using loot tables. So I used to just have word sheets, right? As in Microsoft Word sheets with all the different items. They were my glossaries, but they were all spread out too. There wasn't one, universal document for me to just fish through, and then I'd paste them wherever they need be it a loot table, be it in a function. And that is, a little bit sloppy. We're past that point, I think. So I'm building a glossary of all the items for the pack, and then from that, I can use the loot command. The loot command is nice and functional, so we can do loot, we can do give, insert, replace, spawn, so I can tackle chests, I can tackle a player, I can tackle just crafting out in the open world, still using the drop craft mechanic, but more importantly, I just have a one singular point of reference for everything. But there are a lot of items in the pack. I'm working backwards, weirdly, so I'm up to Nether Star, and I still have all of these to go through. And mind you, some of them, have 1 or 2 items, and then some of them have, a lot more. And we're also reworking a lot of things. So the Nether Star use, the diamond use, the netherite scrap use, the rare item use, we're going to cut back on and swap over to Jigsaw. So there are a ton of stuff for me to actually, the Jigsaw is going to be the biggest component. In fact, I've skipped way past Jay. But, right, let's talk about components, because there are some fun things you can do with components. There is still pretty hefty limitations that I don't generally like, right? You still have to work around them, and it's not really a fix or ease of use for anyone making data pack. It's more just, instead of doing this tactic, you now have to do this tactic. And the big ones that come to mind are, for instance, durability or custom items and weapons, and then also repair. So for instance, repair, on tools, diamond uses diamond. Shears is the only tool, I believe, that you can't repair without obviously using shears to repair, which in itself is problematic because then it just comes back to iron. Well, the fishing rod is the same, no? Yeah, the fishing rod's probably the same. So fishing rod, shield, there's a couple. But my point is, if we get a component that says you can define this item to repair, that would be fantastic. The other one, store enchantments, is still only a enchanted book feature. I was playing around with items. Do I have anything with enchantment? Yeah, so we have a jigsaw block with a stored enchantment. This isn't the jigsaw block itself doesn't have impaling, it has the stored enchantment. So unfortunately, we can't do that, right? So despite being able to define the components, it has no function, it has no use. It's not as flexible as it could be, right? In the fact that you could create, a whole bunch of items that, are thematically cooler than enchanted books, because if you rescan enchanted book, then you still have all the other in-game mechanics tied to enchant book. So for instance, taking it to a grindstone, getting a normal book, and all those other functions that you probably don't want. Same goes with custom tools. Although you can define mining tools and block breaking tools easily, you can't really define weapons or weapons that lose durability. So you still have to come up with a inbuilt system. You can use, for instance, the item modify system, right? You just set up a function, you have it target the player, you have it target their main hand, the item they're using. And then, for instance, you just edit the components and use that to minus your ability. That in itself is still problematic because you'd have to, it's a two-tiered system at the least. You'd need a scoreboard system to count uses, and then a function to then convert that scoreboard into the damage, because there is no just way to additively, right, minus your ability. You can set a direct value with components. So altogether, while there are, some very, very useful components, it is still very much a work in progress, I will say. And I would highly expect them to also transition it to entities and everything else in the game, right? Away from NPT to just components all around, which means we're at a point where there's probably going to be another big breaking update that then you have to rework a ton of stuff, which is also a little bit annoying and tedious, right? I understand resource-wise them not having the manpower or the ability to implement everything all at once, but let me pull up the actual component list and we'll go through their uses pretty much. Okay, so here we are per the wiki, right? We'll start from the top and we'll just read through them and give us, pseudo explanation. So modifiers still works, right? It's still similar to the normal way. You define which attribute you want to modify. You still have to give it a UUID and a slot. Now, I do wish some of the tooltips were a little bit better, because I don't like hiding tooltips because these are very impactful information to know, right? Having them as just a secret multiplier is kind of weird. So for instance, in the case of any, it still lists every single slot. Same with hand, right? It'll still list main hand, offhand. It's nice that there's a universal term to, dictate whether or not it's any slots, hand, armor, but then it still breaks in. If it was tooltip wise, just any was any slot, right? Plus blah, 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 hand plus blah, 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 and then armor plus blah, 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 but it's not. So it's still somewhat of a limitation to me, but yeah, it's still, again, same old system. The tooltips, there's a lot of functionality in being able to hide different parts, right? I wish you could hide individual lore segments, but maybe that's to come. Banner patterns, right? Again, a lot of this was already accessible and customizable. It was just a different format. There is definitely a lot newer, cooler stuff, which we'll probably dive a little bit deeper into. Bucket entities, I wish you could define an entity to actually summon. Right now, you can do an axolotl. You could obviously do some sort of way to define the axolotl, mess around with any of the values you can edit, and then check it, and then change into something else. So that's kind of a workaround, but again, it's not easement, it's just a different way, a different approach to the same level of steps. Bundle contents can break, right? All these are just great stuff for you to play around with. Definitely going to be useful for data pack creation, don't get me wrong, but some of them, could be a bit more flavorful, a bit more impactful if they just took it a step further in what you can actually edit and do, right? So for instance, the enchantment that we were talking about. So we have enchantments, but then we also have stored enchantments down in the S section, which I'm trying to find. Did I go too far? Yeah, stored enchantment. So again, doesn't work because it's not actually the functionality of the component, it's the functionality of the enchanted book. So despite being able to, add this component to anything you want, aside from weapons, no, even in the case of weapons, I believe if you use an anvil to combine the two, it will only take enchantments, it won't take stored enchantments, right? So despite, again, having access to it, it's not super useful. Now, the big one that I do dislike is the max damage stack size mechanic, right? So stack size, wonderful. It's nice that you can then define, potions have the ability to stack to 1, 3, 8, 64, whatever you want to do, because that's super impactful for PvP, being able to, not take up so many inventory slots, can create something powerful, something impactful. But in this case, right, when it comes to custom weapons and items, you cannot, for instance, take a jigsaw block and then define the damage. Doesn't matter, because the jigsaw block has the inbuilt component of stack size. Now, consequently, because they've made it incompatible, you can't set the stack size to 1 and then set damage, right? So if we jump back into Minecraft, this is what I mean. If I do / give us a jigsaw block, or any block that, again, can stack usually, and we set the components, if we were to do max damage, right, so this is its durability, we can't actually define anything. If I were to change this to something that already has a stack size of 1, therefore can have durability, right, it's going to go to yellow. It's going to work. So that is problematic, because it is something you'd really want to use and play around with. Again, even though you have to do that 2-tiered system of having a scoreboard, you don't want, again, to have random items that can be repaired with random items or accessible items, right? You say use shears. Again, you can use shears to repair it, which could then break packs, right, and not really be the method you want for implementing new items. Secondly, you can't really define weapons or tools or on-hit durability loss, right, or anything like that, or interactions like that. You can only define, obviously, the attributes and whatever image you put, but you can define tools. So you can define breaking blocks, you can define losing durability, or the list of blocks, going all over the place, which is not so useful when there is stuff that we're obviously directly talking about. But is it can? Place can break, yeah. No, not can break. Oh, God, it's a tool, right? Pot, potions, no rarity, recipes, repair, cost, or enchantments, writable, unbreakable. I've skipped it, so we'll get to it when we get to it. But yeah, where were we? We were at custom model data. Again, same thing. Custom name, you can use that to define the name. That then can be reworked, so think of it as the anvil mechanic. There is also just name, right? And that is an overarching name for the item. Think of it as the way items are built in-game. So for instance, you put it in an item frame, you put it in an anvil, it has that base name that doesn't show and acts as a normal item, whereas this acts as you've renamed the item, which is impactful and useful. You have damage, right? This, again, isn't a flexible number. It just sets it to X number that you define. You can't do it, again, additively. So for instance, say you want a -1 durability, you'd have to use a predicate and a different system to slowly increment the durability in relation to a score, right? So just a function to be able to do math with it would be wonderful. Dyed color, again, just normal customizable stuff. Same with enchantment glints, enchantments. The way they've reworked it, I do actually like, right? So it's a lot easier to type out and implement. It is just, you define the level. So in this little bracket, you'd have the ID and it's ... equal to whatever level it is, which is, again, super, just what's slick, right? More refined, more compact when writing out a bunch of data. Entity data. So I believe this goes back to NBT, which is what I was talking about before, where they're probably at some point going to use a component system for entities, in which case that would be highly flexible as well, but will, again, be another point where the version breaks a ton of stuff. Fire resistant, I definitely like. I don't know if there's a way to define that without the invulnerability when you actually throw an item out, but the fact that you can make anything you want fire resistant, so for instance, act like obsidian, is definitely a wonderful mechanic. Food. Now this is the big glorious one to me, because this is the most flexible part of the components, being able to actually make an item act like food. Now, if you could change the animation or redefine the animation or the particle or the sound effect, right, without getting into modding territory, that would also be fantastic, but I digress. So we can define food, and we have used this, right? I have this soul, but we might as well grab a new one. In fact, let me just clear. We'll go loot, give us glossary. Now I have to remember the term. It is boss. Nope, it is nether star, right? Item. And then what it is in the pack. So souls, apostate will do, right? So we get ourselves a soul of the apostate. And now I can eat this slowly. I did make it very slow. And it will give me wither and darkness, right? But what I can do, if I'm quick enough, it's that one, is I can set the amplifier for the darkness. So for instance, this has an amplifier of 101. Now this is something that I can readily check and cause a unique effect with, meaning that the most customizable and flexible system of the components is the food mechanic, right? I don't have to tag, I don't have to check the item, I don't have to get the player's data. I can basically just look for specific and unique combinations of potions to then apply a different function to the player. So for instance, in this case, if I have Darkness 101, right, something unobtainable in the base game, it could then trigger a function that does X, right? Be it give experience, an item, summon stuff, whatever I want. And that in itself to me is the most impactful thing, because you don't have to set nutrition, you don't have to set saturation, you can make them 0, 0. You redefine the seconds, make it a bit more complex, make it a bit quicker if you want an instant activated item, right? And then again, you set the effects and you define it however you want. You can again make it more flexible by just having these true and false, more statements to check. It's similar to the trim system in what it opens up in being able to detect and activate. Then you also have probability, right? Which is also just flavorful. So overall, the food component is just my favorite thing, right? Again, I'm adding this to a nether star. So I'm making a nether star into a food item, which is weird, right? Eating a nether star. But then again, thematically and functionally for a pack, huge, huge. Definitely the best component, right? Okay, what else do we have? We have additional tooltip. Again, just being able to break this up, right? And specifically hide. I never really got into the flags because I know you could define different flag numbers to hide specific things, but my understanding is, again, in terms of, say, lore, you can't hide specific lines or anything like that. So even in the lore, if there was just, again, a little toggle, right? No computer science background. So if anything I'm saying is outlandish or would be impossible to integrate anyway, disregard it, right? Instruments, goat horns, and more specific stuff. I'd assume it's similar to the durability or anything like that. It would be functionally only for the goat horn because you still need the mechanic of being able to interact and play the goat horn. Tangible projectile is also kind of cool, right? So it can be picked up by the player, except in creative. So custom items maybe, but again, its flexibility isn't really there. Item name, this is what we were talking about before. So unlike custom component, the name can't be changed through an anvil and does not show in some labels such as the banner marker or item frame. So it's basically just a new item, so to speak. Then we have lock, old mechanic, don't really have to worry about it. Lore, map. So maps, I want to play around with actually, because there would be a complex way to define the coordinates, right? Again, you'd probably have to use scoreboards and predicates, but that's huge, right? Just the ability that you have access to that type of mechanic is good enough. Just takes some creative thinking. Max damage and stack size, again, the fact that you can't use both, so you can't define anything as one and then give it durability is problematic, right? If this auto sets the stack size to 1, that'd be kind of cool. But if you try to give it through a loot table or any other means, right, other than in-game with commands, it will just give you a naked item, right? With no components, it will disregard the whole line of text because, again, they're incompatible. Then we have the bottle amplifiers, fine, potion decoration, potion contents. Also as nice as the food mechanic, right? Again, instead of eating, you can make it a throwable splash potion. No, you can't because that's inbuilt to the mechanic. You can make anything a drinkable potion, right? So I guess it's whether or not you want the eating animation or the drinking animation. And again, use the same sort of mechanic where you give them a custom amplifier for a potion, and then that allows you to trigger any function you want. And there are a ton of potion effects that don't really say use, and again, to great levels, right? You do a second of anything, you do a second of like weakness, second of, I'm trying to think what would have an impact, luck, bad luck, anything like that to just, again, check it and run functions. Big problem though that obviously I foresee with all this is it's a big push to everyone using, say, jigsaw blocks or, non-obtainable items to create their packs. And then again, with the potion contents, the food contents, any pack that uses that system, there is that spontaneous chance of great overlap that makes packs incompatible because you can't define, unique IDs within that, right? Or unique amplifiers. You're still within that set range of 0 to 255, I want to say, right? 256 is the actual number, but it starts at 0, so it's 255. I might be wrong, it might be 256. Right, and then profiles for the heads, rarity to define the color of the name. Make it slightly more simplistic when you're defining text, right? You don't have to use the JSON format, write out a big string. I mean, we might as well just open up my templates, right? Because it says all the components that I'm interested in messing around with, right? So instead of using JSON, you can just have it equal the text that you want to implement, right? Same with the lore, pattern, glints, all the enchantment stuff, modifiers, what else? Stack size, damage, yeah. This is basically everything I think is functional to make a data pack interesting. Everything else is too specific to really use. Tool, here's what we were talking about before. Yeah, so you can make any item into a tool, right? You can give it the rules, right? Make it equivalent to any other tool in the game, or make it something completely unique, you know, target a string of blocks that you define. But again, durability. So you can do this, but then you have to actually set the total durability, which then becomes an issue because then you have to pick items that already have that one stack size. So for instance, if I made something into a tool, if I made a jigsaw into a tool, it would not actually be able to lose durability because it wouldn't have durability because it would still have that stack size. Now I'm curious what it would default to, right? I haven't messed around with it too much. If you were to set the stack size to 1 and then still make it a tool, I mean, we can play around with it in a, well, this is running a bit long actually. I might mess around with it and see what exactly I can get working. Unbreaking, right? Again, kind of weird, but I can see its use, right? There's a lot of stuff that overlaps and conflicts that needs to be a little bit better ironed out. The book system is so much better to write, right? Making custom books is a lot less to play around with and have to write out. Now, the big sad thing, there are so many components from the April Fool's update that I'm pretty sure all of us wish they kept, right? So we have Minecraft clicks, fantastic. If you could just set any item in the inventory, which you should be able to because it just tracks it. What else do we have? The fletching mechanic, heat, hovered, right? These are so flexible. Even just the experience mechanic would be great. Be able to make anything give experience. But who knows, they might rework them in some fashion. All right, so just to sum up in terms of the pack, because we've basically just spent more time talking about the components, I am currently working on a glossary of all the custom items I want for the pack, right? That itself is taking a decent amount of time. I've done a hefty amount of it, I want to say, but you know, I'm probably not even a fifth of the way because I've made a lot of items. The pack is very immense. Anytime I show off stuff is very fractional compared to it in its entirety. I really want to do a playthrough, but the pack needs to be stable and the pack needs to be, you know, to the point where I want to play through it, right? There's still a lot of features that I'm working on and editing, so, you know, that'll take time. And then for the actual pack itself, we're going to move again to a modular system. So we'll have the basic features of the pack, right, just in Runechant, and then everything else will be gated by scoreboard, and you'll be able to toggle the different features you want. So for instance, you don't want the magic system, you don't have to play with the magic system, you don't want the rune traps or the seasonal system, you can decide whether or not to toggle them on or off. And again, makes it easier for me in building it, checking things, bug fixing, adding features. So altogether, it's a much better idea, right, to separate it all, right, and make them, again, sort of think of it like a brain where at certain points this neuron fires and this lights up and that lights up, and it should cut down on lag, although we haven't really had a lag for a decent time. Thank you, Statistically Blue, but I digress. All right, a lot of work for me, so I just wanted to give a little update. It is happening in the background, even though content is not coming out for Minecraft. It'll just take time. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. See ya.